Welcome, everyone, to the Vietnamese Mental Health Cultural Competency Workshop. My name is Paul Liu. I am a member of the board for NAMI, California, and I'm so glad that you're with us today for this workshop. Before we start, let me very quickly introduce the presenters and the moderators. So we have Lily, we have Tu, and we also have Leslie. So Lily Nguyen, she is the program coordinator for what's called Boat People SOS, PBSOS Center for Community Advancement. Uh, Ms. Wen grew up in the heart of Little Saigon in Orange County, LA. Woohoo! I'm in Orange County myself. She was raised by her immigrant Vietnamese family. Ms. Wen has a deep passion in sharing her Vietnamese culture. She graduated with a BA in psychology from California State University, Long Beach. Woohoo! My daughter graduated from there too, and has been working as a program coordinator at the Boat People SOS. Ms. Nguyen is culturally expert in the Vietnamese community and has a deep understanding of the historical importance of the Vietnamese culture and its impact on mental health. As mental health is currently a taboo in the Vietnamese community, she aims to destigmatize and decrease the disparity through community and services that she's sorry, and through services as a provider of education. So today, Ms. Nguyen and her team is going to be talking about Vietnamese history and culture and why there is such a deep-rooted mental health stigma. She will emphasize the importance of being culturally competent when approaching the community as we aim to bridge the gap between the stigma and the journey to better mental health care. So take it away, team.
Thank you so much, Paul. So again, hello everyone. We are BPSOS CCA, which stands for Boat People SOS Center for Community Advancement. We are a nonprofit community-based organization located in the heart of Little Saigon, Orange County. We have served the Vietnamese community for over 20 years in different aspects ranging from immigration to mental health work. I'm Lily Nguyen, a program coordinator at BPSOS. I have a degree in psychology and I have roots in the Vietnamese community and a first generation from a Vietnamese immigrant family.
Hello, my name is Tu Truong. I'm also a program coordinator at BPSOS. I have a master in public health and also served the Vietnamese community for over 5 years.
Perfect. So before we get started, there are some disclaimers for this workshop. As you know, the workshop is recorded and all of the information shared today is for educational purposes only. A quick reminder that in this training, we mentioned a lot about the Vietnamese population, but these ideologies can be seen in most API culture. The information provided in this training is not intended to shed a negative light on the Vietnamese API culture, but to instead, we want to highlight the cultural background of the Vietnamese community and how their beliefs lead to deeply rooted mental health stigma. Additionally, there are some personal examples that may be triggering, so if necessary, feel free to mute the audio on your computer and come back on later. We will give a heads up to when these stories come. To start off, what is the importance of this workshop? Why do we need to attend a workshop on how to approach a very specific community on mental health needs? Well, we know that cultural identity is arguably a person's most prominent identity. And when we're taking into consideration someone's identity, when we're talking about mental health, it will produce greater results. So the purpose of this workshop is we want to gain a better understanding of the Vietnamese and API community, look at what is important to them and why they have deeply rooted stigma against mental health. This training will consistently emphasize the importance of being culturally competent when approaching the community so that we can bridge the gap between stigma and the journey to better mental health. This is just a quick little outline of what we're going to go over today. So, what is cultural competency? The direct Google definition is, cultural competency is the ability to understand, communicate with, and effectively interact with people across cultures. Being culturally competent means you're able to create a relationship with anyone across any cultures without offending them, ensuring they're understood linguistically, and making them feel safe. Being culturally competent means you address all of their needs and wants with a deep understanding of their cultural past. When we're incorporating this culture into patient-client relationships, the client will feel safe and heard. In turn, this will promote beneficial and therapeutic relationships between clients and providers, which will improve the treatment outcomes and treatment retention. And then within these patient-client relationship, understanding the client's cultural background helps address all types of mental health related issues, especially the ones that may not be typically seen by those who do not understand cultural backgrounds. So the first step of being culturally competent is understanding and learning the demographics of the API and Vietnamese community. So the most recent census reports the API community making up of 22.4 million, or around 5.6% of the United States population. From the year 2000 to the year 2015, the API population has grown exponentially around 72%, or 9 million within these 15 years. And this growth is reported to be the fastest growth of any major racial or ethnic minority group. And because this is such a huge growing community, it is really important that we learn about their culture and their needs. Looking specifically at the Vietnamese Americans, they are a relatively new group to the United States. Their first wave of refugees was in 1975, and the most recent was in the 1990s. We also know that Asian Americans tend to underuse mental health services compared to the general population, with only 28% of Asian Americans seeking mental health treatment compared to the 54% of the general population. So we know that a lot of Vietnamese persons had to escape their home country due to the Vietnam War, and they wanted a better life, not only for themselves, but for their future offspring. These traumatic events is what attributed to our organization name, BPSOS, so Boat People SOS. Many Vietnamese refugees had to escape Vietnam in these small canoe-like boats like you see in the picture on the left, and that gives them the name Boat People. The Vietnamese community, unfortunately, have had a long history of dealing with turmoil dating back to the early 1900s when Vietnam was colonized by France, to the First Indochina War, and then to the Vietnam War in 1955. They've had to experience trauma for around a century, and even to this day, Vietnam still has to deal with these consequences. There are stray bombs and landmines all along Vietnam, and there are a lot of health adversities from being exposed to Agent Orange during the war. The Vietnamese people have had to deal with extreme violence, poverty, famine, family separation, imprisonment, escaping war, and civil unrest for a pretty long time. And unfortunately, there is a lot of trauma to heal from for the community. So alongside PTSD, major depression is also very common within the community and other Southeast Asian community members. And something to note is that many Asian Americans express their symptoms somatically and physically, such as through headaches, back pains, digestive problems, and sleep disturbances, rather than experience them emotionally. The symptoms that I just listed are really common and they're associated with other illnesses, so it's not likely that mental health will first come to mind. Now that we've learned some historical background, let's look into the cultural stigma within the community. So the Vietnamese do see expressing your feelings as admitting that you are weak. We know the common Western stereotype that men who share their feelings are less of a man. It's very similar here, but it doesn't have to do with gender. The Vietnamese have a very strong grit your teeth mentality. And for them, gritting your teeth shows that even through tough times, if you can do it, it shows that you're strong. And when you're expressing your feelings, the Vietnamese see it as complaining and not being able to conquer that said obstacle. There's also a lot of shame associated with any kind of mental health related issues, but this can be easily seen in language. The Vietnamese language is pretty behind. For example, in Western cultures, we've canceled certain offensive words associated with mental health, and we've replaced it with more positive and uplifting words and phrases such as mental wellness or starting the mental wellness journey. But unfortunately, the Vietnamese people just haven't gotten there yet. So this is a direct translation of the word we see most commonly used when describing mental health. We can see the word is dien, and it directly translates to crazy. This negative label often comes with a lot of disgrace and judgment from the community. We know that this culture values family honor, and we care a lot about their community and how their community looks at their family. So a lot of the times when you're disclosing to people that you're seeking mental health, you're also kind of telling them that you're crazy and so is your family. And the fear of social rejection is so strong that oftentimes the individual and their family will not disclose about their mental health or seek any kind of treatment. We also know that the Vietnamese culture is very spiritual. A huge percentage of the population practices Buddhism and they practice the religion daily. One of the main principles in Buddhism is reincarnation. And in short, they believe that when you die, you will be judged by how good of a person you are. And if you're deemed a bad person, you either reincarnate into a helpless animal or you reincarnate into a human again, but this time with mental health problems. This idea leads to the belief that reincarnating into a person with mental health problems is a punishment from a past lifetime. Continuing to dive into what is Vietnamese culture, we're going to look at some protective factors in the community. The Vietnamese community has several protective factors that support their mental health and well-being, and if any of these factors are disrupted, they may lose their sense of identity. And some of these factors are having a strong family connection and cultural practices, and possessing strong ethnic identity. So the community is very connected to their background and have a lot of pride being Vietnamese, and the sense of belonging to a group gives them a sense of security. The Vietnamese community is a collectivistic community. So it's very common for the community to help each other and support each other regardless of family ties or not, versus Western communities, which are more individualized. To give an example, in some Western families, as soon as the children of the family is able to, the children will move out. When their parents get old, they may be placed in nursing homes. Western families value their children's identity and want them to think for themselves and value their own individual work. On the other side, API and Vietnamese families will stay together longer. It is less likely for the children of the family to move out, and when their parents get old, they will live with their children in their own home. Collectivistic cultures tend to think about how their actions will affect the people important to them, rather than considering how their actions will affect themselves. So these are three really common phrases that we hear a lot within our community, and unfortunately, they do contribute to the taboo and stigma of mental health. So the first one we already introduced a little bit. If you have a mental health disorder, you are crazy or insane. So this touches on the language not being able to progress and having negative connotations to describe mental health disorder. The second one, if you are sad, then get over it. Again, this reflects the grit your teeth mentality. They are disregarding and invalidating the feelings of being sad, telling them it's easy to just get over it. And if you can't get over something so insignificant, you're seen as weak. The third one, my child is okay. There is nothing wrong with them. By admitting that there is nothing wrong with their child, many parents feel like they're sticking out. They feel like there is something they had done wrong, and they feel like they're alone because none of their friends or families have had to go through this. But we know that this isn't true. We know that mental health problems can arise from anyone, and many API families feel alone because no one is talking about it. The shame and the fear has hidden this world to them, and by just admitting it, they feel as if they're not a part of the community anymore. Within the Vietnamese culture and many other Asian cultures, we strongly believe in filial piety. So filial piety is the practice of the younger generation honoring and respecting their elders. A very common example of this is children taking care of their parents later on in life. This act is considered a rite of passage into adulthood. So within the community, when you're a young child, your parents did everything they could to take care of you. And then when your parents become old, you reach a point of financial stability, and now you can take care of them and all of your parents' needs. Now we are going to go into the type of trauma that is most often seen in API families. As I've touched upon briefly before, many API communities have had to leave their home country due to war and many other things. And the scattering of these Asian people across different parts of the world is called Asian diaspora. Asian diaspora results in parents, relatives, and family members becoming immigrants. And when they migrated, they brought with them their own unique customs and cultures into a brand new country where they became the minority, and they passed along the generational beliefs onto us. And as a result, their offspring will share very similar experiences of culture shock, racism, exclusion, questions of self-identity and belonging. Many of these immigrants would have unresolved trauma because of these huge changes, and they don't even know that they have it. They will have bottled it down, telling themselves that these difficulties just come with the move, and over time it will naturally go away. The Southeast Asian refugees suffered severe trauma, including war-related atrocities, being forced out of their homeland, and encountering life-threatening dangers during their escape. These stressful events have resulted in minor and major psychological symptoms such as anxiety, depression, and PTSD. The trauma that they experience isn't really something that they talk about with their children. They don't want to make it seem that they went through hardships to get where they were. Parents don't really know what these feelings are, and they may project it onto their kids. I would like to share a pretty personal story. This is a trigger warning, so if anyone would want to mute their audio, feel free to come back on when we change slides. Only a few months ago did my mom tell me about how my grandfather passed away. It involved my grandfather, who was an educated politician. He was being hunted by people during the war, and he wanted to escape. He called my grandmother from the airport, and he said he would wait for her there, but my grandmother's house was flooded with soldiers 24/7, and she physically couldn't leave for weeks. The phone call was the last we ever heard from him. This story isn't unlike other Vietnamese immigrants' refugee stories, and when I had asked my mom why it took her 22 years to tell me, she said that it made her really sad and very angry. She said that she wanted to protect me from that kind of sadness and anger and didn't want me to experience what she did. I can't even imagine what other kinds of trauma she went through and how it had affected her. By her never talking about it, she bottled up that trauma, and who knows how it affected her life and how she had decided to parent me.
We will now be going over some common communication approaches within the Vietnamese culture. The first one is to show respect, address elderly patient and family members with a slight bow of the head. To foster a personable relationship, ask the patient for the correct pronunciation of his or her name. Or when speaking to a patient, avoid using medical jargon, use simple terms and phrases. To confirm understanding, have patient repeat back information in their own word. Next, please. We will now be discussing about how the AAPI community is seen from the Western perspective. There has been an ongoing stereotype that Asian Americans are the model minorities, but this is a myth. The model minority myth was created by a sociologist, Nguyen. This myth refers to the perception that Asian Americans are high achievers of socioeconomic success on par with the white Americans. But this myth originally was created to refer to East Asians, like Japanese, Chinese, Korean, and Taiwanese. Statistics that are available to prove this stereotype only capture the success of East Asians. To some, this is seen as the positive stereotype, but this is not the case. This misconception takes away from the fact that Asian Americans are still a marginalized group, especially Southeast Asians like Vietnamese, Cambodian, Hmong, Laotian, and Burmans. These groups are referred to as the forgotten Asian. The high achieving numbers that East Asians achieve covers the fact that many Southeast Asian communities are struggling to reach the same level of success and need resources, but are not getting because according to statistics, that's mostly East Asians. Asian Americans as a whole do not need the extra resources. This overgeneralization places high expectations on Asian Americans, leading to feeling of self-doubt, inadequacy, psychological problem, and suicidality. Next, please. Here we will now be discussing the cultural norms of how the Vietnamese community makes decisions. In Vietnamese culture, the traditional family hierarchy is valued highly. At the top of this hierarchy will be the elders of the family. For example, at dinner time, no one starts eating until the eldest of the family is served first at the side of respect. The Vietnamese people often consult a family member or friend before making any decisions regarding their health. This is another example of being a collectivistic culture. We don't make decisions based on ourselves. We make decisions based on our family. And Vietnamese people tend to listen to professionals with titles such as doctor, but especially if the doctor is the same ethnicity. Next, please. Here we will be discussing about the differences of Eastern and Western medicine. Some Asian Americans with traditional backgrounds do not readily accept Western biopsychosocial explanations for substance use and mental disorders. Many are worried and unsure of the side effects that come with Western medicine. Generally, if there is a medical concern, Asian Americans will first use herbal, traditional remedies, and go to an Eastern medicine doctor. If those fail, then they will go to a Western doctor. Asian Americans generally tend to approach health and wellness in a holistic manner. The Vietnamese culture highly values the natural and holistic approach to health. Above, we see some examples of popular healing methods. Dầu xanh, this literally translates to green oil. This is a very popular multi-purpose healing eucalyptus oil. Herbal medicine. Herbal medicine is a very common form of medicine used for anything and everything. Next is som. This is basically an herbal sauna. Basically, you make yourself a makeshift sauna with a towel and a hot pot of water, different herbs. This is a popular healing method to heal cold, fevers, and flu. The purpose is to expel all the toxins out of the body through sweat droplets. Cupping. Cupping is starting to be quite popular now in Western medicine, especially once people discover that Michael Phelps did it. This is a technique used for bodily aches and pain, used for relaxation and massage therapy. Coining. Coining is done with eucalyptus oil and a coil to stretch marks into the back. This technique is used for ridding the body of toxins when it experiences a cold, fever, flu, or other symptoms similar. Next, please. Like many other Asian cultures, the Vietnamese culture is deeply ingrained with teaching from Confucianism. Some of these teaching that we still see today in the Vietnamese community is the concept of maintaining respect for oneself and honoring one's family ancestors. This includes an example of many Vietnamese people do not feel comfortable asking for help because they do not want to be an inconvenience. And for many, they feel ashamed of the situation that they are in. There is a lot of stigmatization that goes on within the community. It is especially shameful to ask for help when it comes to mental health. Now we will be discussing cultural norms regarding the topic of shame and humiliation within the Vietnamese culture. First of all, the Vietnamese client or family member will be extremely concerned about the qualification of the counselor. Or the client is hesitant to involve others in the treatment process, or the client is excessively worried about confidentiality. The client refuses to cover expenses with private insurance, or family members refuse to support treatment, or the client refuses treatment even when severe problems are detrimental. Next, please. Vietnamese convey respect and other traditional values through nonverbal gestures, such as gentle bows, smiles, nods, and avoiding direct eye contact. Be aware of physical gestures that may be normal in the American culture that may be offensive in the Vietnamese culture. Some things such as winking, beckoning someone with the index finger, placing hands on hips while talking, patting a person's back, pointing to other people while talking, or touching a person's head. To avoid confrontation or signaling disrespect, Vietnamese may not express disagreement. Do not assume that nodding or responding yes to questions means that the person agrees or understands. It may mean that a person is listening or wants to show respect to the speaker. Next, please. Since 2020, the start of the pandemic, we have seen a significant increase in hate crimes in the Asian American community. This has made headlines, and today we are just going into the basics of it. The first cases of COVID-19 were discovered in Wuhan, China. This had driven anti-Asian connotation and inappropriate use of wording like China virus and Kung flu. With already existing xenophobia, the pandemic has only exacerbated the anti-Asian sentiment. This has deeply impacted our community negatively. There is a looming fear for our community members to even leave their households, to take walks around their neighborhood, and even fear to go to work. There is an ongoing trend that these attacks are targeting our vulnerable populations, which include the elderly and women at a very high rate. As mentioned earlier, these hate crimes also stem from the model minority myth, which further segregates the minority population with the idea of hierarchy of minorities. Many stereotypes revolving Asian have been seen positive. However, these have had detrimental effect of expectation versus actual need. This deeply seated myth has created division among minority groups that has done major efforts in standing in solidarity with the Asian community. So what can we do to help? We can start with educating ourselves on the topic, choosing to stand in solidarity with each other, and dedicate time and efforts to support AAPI programs that are set in place to help the community, such as chaperoning services for elderly Asian. Next, please. So when working with the Vietnamese community, there are certain things to expect. First, many Vietnamese community members like to omit or disguise certain information on forms. In terms of income, they may report lower than what they actually make due to the fear of having their services taken away, or even omit their income information due to feeling shame of having low income. This is very important that we explain to them that information is confidential and will only use to benefit the family. We see in the Vietnamese community that they do not like getting in the way of other people and are non-confrontational. This can definitely be stemmed from the trauma during Vietnam War. In Vietnam, the military and police figures were not people that were there to help them. They were the reason for being tortured and experiencing all these traumas. Because of that, we don't want to come face to face to authority. It's intimidating, and there is always a language barrier. It causes a lot of anxiety. Next, please. Here we have some do and don'ts that we should be concerned when working with the Vietnamese client. For example, provide a reputable or trained interpreter who is knowledgeable about the Vietnamese culture. Ask the client how they identify as and what nationality they claim, or use terminology the client will understand. Focus on having discussion with clients about their understanding of mental health and problem at hand. There's some don't that we shouldn't do is assume that just because someone appears to be of Asian American, isn't that they identify as that, or generalize all Asian cultures as one. Shame client based on their choices or lack of choices. Next, please. And we have some best outreach method, traditional media, we have newspaper, radio, word of mouth. Healthcare promoters have the Asian American doctors promote mental health care services to their client. Or the agency should be local to the community. Or healthcare promoters should go directly into the community to promote their services. Next, please. When outreaching, especially when using image flyers and presentation, it's important to use the correct flag when working with the Vietnamese community. The correct one is the yellow flag with the 3 red stripes. This is the flag that signifies the united bond between the North, Central, and the South. The red one is incorrect. The red with the yellow star may trigger some negative emotion from the Vietnamese community, and it may remind them about the Vietnam War and their trauma from escaping the war. Next, please. And here, I want to introduce you some other local agencies that are great resources to help serve the API population. We encourage you to check them out. Next, please. Thank you so much for joining our workshop today. This brings us to our Q&A question. Please feel free to add your question or comment for us in the chat, or just unmute yourself and speak up. Do you have any question for us? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question. We'll try our best to answer it. Or if not, you can ask us below the chat. Any question?
I just wanted to jump in for just 1 second and let everybody know, please go ahead and ask your questions in the chat box on Whova. You can just click view, you can just click ask a question and type it in. Everybody is muted, so you'll have to filter through the chat box to answer those questions. I do see a question coming in now, and I'll send it over to our moderator. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so I'm not quite sure if, Paul, you're able to see those questions coming through. So I'm going to go ahead and share that question with Lily. The question is, do you have any resources for Vietnamese?
Thank you for your question. So these are the resources that we did list in our presentation. A lot of these do serve the Vietnamese community. So we have NAMI, MHA, VROC, OCAPICA, Asian Pacific Counseling and Treatment Centers, and Compassion and SGB.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the question. So as of right now, we don't have any further questions. Again, we can give another minute or so if anyone wants to take the time to type in their question. I know it's a bit of a thought process sometimes. So we'll give you a moment. Also, if for any reason you think of questions after the conference, we're more than happy to still have you guys ask under that session in the QA on Whova. And then we'll be more than happy to respond on our website. As everything gets up on the website, you'll also have this presentation put onto the website as well. So as of right now, Lily, there hasn't been any additional questions coming in. If you guys have any final thoughts. So we don't have any final questions. Paul, if you wanted to wrap up. Oh, we can't hear you. Okay. Let's see what's going on there. I think we fixed it.
Sorry, I think we're not seeing anything in the chat on our end, so we're so sorry for missing anybody's message, which is why I think Paul was saying he was muted, but cannot unmute.
I think we got it. Paul, I think
Okay.
you're unmuted. There you go.
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me now. So again, my apologies for that. Looks like I wasn't able to come on and I was not able to respond to any of the chats. So my apologies for that. But again, thank you so much, Lily, and too for sharing. I think, sometimes we forget, some of the things that you're sharing is so important for us to be much more aware and much more understanding of, all of the different diverseness that we have and all the different nuances that we all have to, appreciate, because some of the things that you mentioned reminds me of, my culture and things that, may be very, very specific to my culture that maybe sometimes it would be awfully nice to share with other people so that we actually have an appreciation of, the cultural differences and the sensitivity to that. And especially, when you show the picture of the oil, my mom uses that oil. So no doubt, these are real deals. These are real cultural sensitivities that we all need to be aware of and we all need to really learn from. So thank you so much for sharing that. I did see some questions and I think they're all, I think, well done. I think maybe one question that maybe if I could pose, right? I know that, you're all doing great work. And I guess the question I ask is, how do you think maybe other cultures, in other words, I know there was a slide talking about how to engage. How do you think maybe, people from other cultures can really, I mean, if someone says, how can I, make it better? How can I do this? How can I support, the Vietnamese community in a better way? What do you think would be, some of your responses?
Thank you, Paul. I think that's definitely a great thing that you pointed out. Regarding your question, I think having patience and when you from the open up, topics like these can be very hard to talk about, be very open-minded when we're listening to their story, understand where their stigma comes from, and empower them to seek the services that they need. Definitely don't try to force anything. Don't let them believe that what they're thinking is false, because it's not. It's their culture. That's what they believe growing up, and to them it's not wrong, right? So we're just here to empower them, making sure they're heard, and just to empower them to seek the services that they need.
Thank you, Lily. I just want to add a little bit that, yeah, definitely don't force them to believe anything that, like they don't believe. Definitely just kind of explain to them what's going on, and very important that be knowledgeable about the topics, like understand their history a little bit, their background, and why they're coming to that state, and kind of talk about that with them, and they will feel like you understand them, and they will be more willing to listen.
Okay, great. So maybe, and maybe if I may ask another question, and I think it may be something that we all can learn from as well. And again, from part of our training at NAMI and our philosophy is to really instill, on individuals that may be impacted with mental health and mental disorders, is to really, recognize that, what, it's not your fault. It is not your doing, and it's not your fault. And I know that's easier said than done in most cultures to tell someone, oh, it's okay, it's not your fault. So I'm wondering if maybe, you could share your insights on that.
Yeah, unfortunately, we do deal with that about in our clients in our community all the time. This relates a lot to the idea of reincarnation, right? So if you seem as a bad person, you reincarnate with problems. And a lot of times we tell our clients that you can believe that. We're not telling them that it's wrong or anything. We just want them to focus on the now, right? And it's definitely, again, it's not their fault. We just want them to be open and understand that it's not their fault, and we can just focus on getting the help that they're needing right now.
Okay.
Yeah, totally agree to that. So it's very important to let them know that it's not their fault at all. It's not something that they have to, like be responsible for. It's just, a part of life, and is very common. The stigma is very, very big in Vietnamese culture. So just let them know that everything is not your fault, and maybe educate them a little bit about the topics, letting them know that a lot of people, like be experiencing the same thing, so that they don't keep blaming themselves.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think we are at the end of our time here. So thank you all for joining us today. And thank you so much, Lily and Tu and Leslie and everyone else for really giving us very insightful information about the Vietnamese community and the culture of Vietnam. Thank you so much for doing that. If you do have any questions about the content, please feel free to email the presenters. If you have any questions or concerns for today's events, please feel free to contact NAMI California at nami.california@namca.org. You're welcome to leave the session and move on to the next part of your agenda. We invite you to take the evaluation survey that will be sent to you at the end of your conference. Your feedback will be grateful, and it will help us to kind of find our next conference. And please remember to take some and break for self-care. See you in the next session. Have a great afternoon.